You know what's absolutely hilarious? When a species you've written off as barely past rubbing sticks together turns out to be the one who saves your entire civilization. Oh, and being forced to admit it? That's even better. Let me back up a bit. I'm Paxul, Senior Communications Specialist for the Galactic Monitoring Network, stationed at Outpost 7249 orbiting the spectacular binary stars of Kepler 186. And by spectacular, I mean mind-numbingly boring. Nothing ever happens here, except the occasional solar flare and my junior officers complaining about the cafeteria's synthetic protein cubes. Senior Specialist, we're picking up something unusual, announced Lieutenant Ven, her blue antennae twitching with excitement. This was the most animation I'd seen from her in 3 orbital cycles. I slithered over to her monitoring station, trying not to look too eager. Define unusual, Lieutenant. If it's another space whale mating call, I'm going back to my relaxation pod. No, sir. It's a quantum encrypted signal. But the encryption method is ancient. I mean, really ancient. Now that got my attention. I extended my secondary eyes for a better look at her holographic display. The signal pattern was unlike anything in our current databases, a complex weave of quantum signatures that shouldn't even exist anymore. Run it through the historical archives, I ordered, already knowing this would take hours of processing time we didn't have. And someone get me a stimulant beverage. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Our most sophisticated decryption algorithms chewed through layers of quantum coding that hadn't been used in millennia. When the first readable patterns emerged, I nearly dropped my beverage capsule. By the 7 moons, I whispered. It's a distress beacon. From the precursors themselves. The precursors of civilization so advanced they'd seemingly vanished into another dimension of existence. They'd left behind ruins and artifacts across the galaxy, but never a direct message. Until now. Sir called out Officer Mira from the signal tracking station. We've traced the original signal source. It's coming from the ruins in system 8472. But there's something else. I rolled all 4 of my eyes. What now? The signal's being received. Actively received, and they're attempting to decode it. Which of our outposts, I demanded, already reaching for my command console to coordinate our response. Mira's voice trembled slightly. It's not one of ours, sir. The reception point is coming from a small planet in a completely underdeveloped system. The inhabitants call it Earth. I burst out laughing. I couldn't help it. Earth? That backwater world where they still used combustion engines and thought digital technology was advanced? The species that had barely touched their own moon? Impossible, I declared. Their technology is practically prehistoric. They can't possibly understand quantum encryption, let alone precursor-level encoding. Run the trace again. Already did, sir. 3 times Mira projected the trace results onto the main screen. They're not just receiving it, they're making progress on the decryption. I stared at the data streams, my amusement fading into disbelief. The humans, and it was definitely humans, were taking approaches to the decryption that our best computers hadn't even considered. They were treating the quantum signatures like some kind of cosmic puzzle game, trying solutions that should have been ridiculous but were somehow working. Should we stop them? Lieutenant Ven asked uncertainly. The signal wasn't meant for them. They're not ready for this level of contact. I watched as another layer of the ancient code fell to the humans' unorthodox decryption methods. These supposedly primitive beings were unraveling one of the greatest mysteries in our known galaxy, and they were doing it with what probably amounted to stone tools compared to our technology. No, I said slowly, a growing sense of unease settling in my primary stomach. We watch. And we prepare. Because something tells me our friends on Earth are about to surprise us all. Little did I know just how massive that surprise would be. Have you ever watched a baby solve a quantum physics equation? No? Well, I have. Metaphorically speaking, of course. That's exactly what it felt like watching humans tackle the precursor signal. Within just 48 standard hours of our initial detection, the humans had blazed through encryption layers that our civilization had spent decades studying. My observation room had turned into a circus of dropping jaws and twitching appendages as we watched them work. Sir, they're broadcasting a response. Officer Mira's voice hit a pitch I didn't know her species could achieve. They're sending it in, every known galactic frequency, and some we've never seen before. I slithered to her station so fast I nearly tripped over my ceremonial robe. What do you mean they're responding? They can't possibly have. The words died in my throat as I saw the data streaming across her screen. The humans hadn't just decoded the precursor signal, they'd understood it. And now they were answering, using a modified version of the same quantum encryption method. Get me the High Council, I barked. Now. But before anyone could react, every screen in our command center lit up with a new signal. A human face appeared, female, with steel gray hair and the kind of expression that could probably stop a solar flare. Greetings, monitoring station of the galactic civilization currently observing Earth, she said, somehow looking directly at me through the screen. I am Admiral Brenda Summers of the Earth Response Fleet. Yes, we know you're there. Those quantum shadows your cloaking technology leaves behind? We've been tracking them for months. I felt my secondary stomach do a backflip. They could see us? Had known about us? The High Council was going to have my tentacles for this. We've decoded the precursor signal, Admiral Summers continued, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made my species' natural submissive instincts kick in. It's not just a distress beacon. It's a warning. And given that we've detected your civilization's observation posts across 17 different star systems, we figured you might want to compare notes. Behind me, I heard Lieutenant Venn whisper, 17? We only have 15. Oh. This is highly irregular, I managed to sputter. There are protocols for first contact, committees, preparation periods, cultural integration studies. Admiral Summers actually smiled. With all due respect, we don't have time for your bureaucracy. The precursor signal is counting down to something. Our calculations suggest we have about 3 standard galactic weeks before whatever they were warning about arrives. So, you can either continue watching us like we're some fascinating bacteria in a petri dish, or we can work together. Just then, my communication panel lit up with an incoming transmission from the High Council. At the same time, our long-range sensors detected multiple ships emerging from Earth's orbit. Ships that, by all our scientific understanding, shouldn't have been possible for humans to build. Those vessels, Officer Mira reported, her voice shaking. They're using a modified version of precursor technology, but simplified, more efficient somehow. They've taken the most advanced technology we've ever encountered and made it better. The Earth Response Fleet moved into formation, 30 ships of varying sizes, each one a perfect blend of human ingenuity and precursor engineering. At their center was a vessel that made even our most advanced battle cruisers look like children's toys. That would be the Prometheus, Admiral Summers said, noting my stunned expression. First of her class. We took inspiration from some ruins we found on Mars. Amazing what you can build when you're not bound by traditional thinking, isn't it? The High Council's transmission was now flashing urgently. I should answer it. I would answer it. Right after I finished processing the fact that humans had basically speed-run technological advancement while we'd been watching them mess around with primitive rockets. We're sending you coordinates for a neutral meeting point, Admiral Summers continued. Bring your best scientists, diplomats, and military strategists, and maybe someone who can explain why you thought hiding behind quantum-cloaked satellites was a good way to study an emerging civilization. The transmission ended, leaving our command center in stunned silence. After several moments, Lieutenant Venn spoke up. Sir? What do we tell the High Council? I stared at the fleet of impossible ships hovering just beyond our position. Ships that shouldn't exist, built by a species that should still be arguing about whether faster-than-light travel was possible. Tell them, I sighed heavily. Tell them humanity has invited us to their party, and they've already proven they don't take no for an answer. And someone get me a stronger stimulant beverage. I have a feeling I'm going to need it. As I watched the Earth Response Fleet take up escort positions around our station, I couldn't help but wonder who had really discovered whom. And more importantly, what exactly had the precursors warned about that had humanity building warships out of their ancient technology? I had a feeling I wasn't going to like the answer. The following day brought the kind of bureaucratic nightmare that would make a black hole seem welcoming. Our first official meeting with the humans was scheduled to take place on their flagship, Prometheus. The High Council, in their infinite wisdom, sent us their top diplomatic team, which mostly consisted of officials who had never actually met a new species before. Remember, I briefed my team as we prepared to board our shuttle. Humans are classified as bipedal mammals. They require regular hydration and atmospheric oxygen. Do not comment on their lack of tentacles. Do not mention their limited visual spectrum. And for the love of all 7 moons, do not offer them snacks, Lieutenant Ven blurted out excitedly, holding up a container. I brought some premium-grade nutritional cubes. I felt a headache forming in all 3 of my brain centers. Lieutenant, our digestive enzymes would literally dissolve there. But she had already bounded ahead, her antennae quivering with enthusiasm. The Prometheus's docking bay was a marvel of engineering that made absolutely no sense. Where our ships followed the sacred principles of symmetry and efficiency, the humans had apparently decided that right angles were merely suggestions. Their crew moved with practiced ease through corridors that curved and intersected at bizarre angles, while our diplomatic team wobbled along like freshly hatched younglings. Admiral Summers met us at the conference room, accompanied by a tall human male who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Senior Specialist Paxul Summers nodded. Allow me to introduce Marcus Thompson, our head of xenolinguistics and cultural integration. Thompson stepped forward, made a surprisingly accurate approximation of our traditional greeting gesture, and then said something that made half our delegation gasp in horror. When he looked around, confused. I just said hello in standard galactic common. I tried to suppress my amusement. You actually just propositioned everyone's ancestral egg layers while suggesting their tentacles were poorly groomed. Thompson's face turned an interesting shade of red. But I used the exact phonetic pattern from your linguistic database. The database you hacked from our observation satellites, I couldn't resist asking. Borrowed, Summers corrected. We borrowed it, temporarily, without permission, for science. Before I could respond, Lieutenant Ven proudly presented her container of nutritional cubes to the humans. Sustenance offerings, a traditional greeting. Thompson, bless his primitive mammalian heart, actually reached for one before I could stop him. How fascinating. The molecular structure must be, wait, is it moving? Of course, Ven beamed. All our best nutrients are still alive when consumed. See how the edges pulse with digestive enzymes. The look of horror on Thompson's face was priceless. Admiral Summers smoothly intercepted the container. We appreciate the gesture, but perhaps we should focus on the precursor signal first. Yes, I agreed quickly. The signal. The countdown. The potential galactic threat that you somehow decoded faster than our entire civilization. Thompson brightened. Oh, that was fun. We treated it like a cosmic escape room puzzle. You know those entertainment chambers where you solve riddles to, no, not a thing in your culture. Right. Well, we noticed the quantum patterns match some ancient video game encryption methods. I held up a tentacle. You decoded a precursor signal using principles from your entertainment software. Among other things, Summers nodded. Marcus here is being modest. His team also used principles from something called interpretive dance and a children's toy called a Rubik's Cube. Our chief science officer fainted dead away. Look, Thompson said, pulling up a holographic display that somehow incorporated zero-point energy in a way our scientists had deemed impossible. The precursor language isn't just about the meaning of symbols. It's about movement, pattern, and intention. They thought in 4 dimensions minimum, which we already knew from their ruins, I pointed out. Sure, but you were trying to translate it like a static text. We treated it like a living thing. Watch this. Thompson made a gesture, and the hologram transformed into a swirling dance of quantum particles that somehow reminded me of my favorite childhood lullaby. As the pattern shifted, I began to understand. The humans hadn't just decoded the message, they'd learned to think like the precursors. Impossible, whispered our science minister, who had apparently regained consciousness. Your species is too young, too. Too primitive, Summers suggested with a raised eyebrow. Too fond of right angles and processed food that doesn't try to digest us back. Too different, I finished diplomatically. The precursors were the height of logical, structured civilization. Thompson actually laughed. No offense, but that's exactly why you couldn't decode their message. You all thought like advanced civilizations. We thought like curious children with access to quantum computers and too much caffeine. Just then, every screen in the room lit up with new data. The countdown had accelerated. "Well," Summers said grimly, "looks like we'll have to continue this cultural exchange later. Whatever's coming, it's arriving ahead of schedule." I watched as Thompson casually manipulated the quantum hologram with gestures that should have torn apart the fabric of space-time. "We're going to have to work together," I realized aloud. "Our experience and your unconventional methods." "Exactly," Thompson grinned. "Now, who's hungry? We brought snacks too. Don't worry, nothing in them is alive or will dissolve your internal organs." Lieutenant Venn looked disappointed. Humans, I was learning, had a disturbing knack for making the impossible seem mundane and the mundane seem impossible. We had 2 weeks to prepare for an ancient threat, and our best hope was a species that had gone from horse-drawn carriages to quantum engineering in the blink of a galactic eye. The universe has a sense of humor, after all. The first sign that everything was about to go spectacularly wrong came during what humans call a coffee break. I'd just figured out how to drink from their bizarre cylindrical containers without using all 3 of my mouths when our sensors went berserk. Multiple quantum ruptures detected. Officer Mira's voice rang through the Prometheus's command center. "Energy signatures match. They match precursor patterns, but wrong somehow. Corrupted." Admiral Summers was already moving to the command chair, coffee forgotten. "Show me." The main display lit up with imagery that made my tentacles curl. Massive ships were emerging from tiers in space-time, their designs similar to the ruins we'd studied for generations, but twisted into shapes that hurt to look at. They moved like predators, flowing through space in ways that violated several laws of physics. "Well," Thompson said from his station, where he'd been teaching Lieutenant Venn about something called knock 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 jokes, "I guess we know what the warning was about. The precursors didn't vanish. They evolved into something nasty." "Incoming transmission," Mira announced. "It's broadcasting on all frequencies simultaneously, even ones that shouldn't exist." The image that appeared on our screens showed something that might once have been humanoid, might once have been like my species, might once have been like a dozen different races. Now it was a shifting mass of quantum probability, its voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Lesser beings," it said in perfect galactic common. "Your attempt to comprehend our warning is noted. Your resistance is irrelevant. Your evolution will be corrected." "Friendly bunch," Summers muttered. "Marcus, analysis." Thompson's fingers danced across his console. "They're speaking every known language simultaneously, even dead ones. The quantum flux in their ships suggests they exist partially out of phase with normal space-time. They're not just advanced, they're transcended, in a very wrong way." "Transcended into complete jerks," Lieutenant Venn observed, earning a surprised laugh from several human crew members. That's when our comms lit up again. The High Council was dispatching their senior diplomatic expert, Kira Nan, supposedly the most skilled negotiator in 5 sectors. Her ship dropped out of hyperspace with typical perfect timing and ceremonial flair. I recognized her the moment she strutted onto the bridge, all flowing robes and shimmering bioluminescence. We dated briefly at the academy before she decided her calling was preventing wars rather than studying communications. Senior Specialist Pax Uhl, she greeted me with exactly the right amount of professional distance. "Admiral Summers, I am here to facilitate peaceful." Another quantum rupture interrupted her perfectly practiced speech. 3 more precursor vessels appeared, these even larger than the first wave. "Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be reset," the twisted beings announced. "Resistance will only provide data for the optimization process." "Oh, shut up," Kira Nan snapped, her diplomatic facade cracking instantly. "Admiral Summers, I apologize for my late arrival. The High Council spent 6 hours debating the proper color of robes for this encounter." Summers raised an eyebrow. "While these evolved precursors were preparing to optimize us out of existence." "Indeed. Speaking of which, Kira Nan turned to the main screen. Our records suggest the precursors were logical beings who valued advancement. What happened? The quantum-twisted figure seemed to ripple. We achieved perfection. We evolved beyond physical limitation, beyond moral constraint, beyond purpose. Sounds boring, Thompson interjected. Also, technically not perfect if you had to eliminate concepts like free will and moral constraint to achieve it. I watched in fascination as the entity actually paused, its form fluctuating as if Thompson's words had disrupted its quantum stability. Your primitive understanding is irrelevant, it finally responded, but I swore I heard uncertainty in its impossible voice. Primitive Summers stood up. We decoded your warning signal in 2 days. Took your technology and improved it in ways you never considered. We looked at your quantum mathematics and turned it into art. While you were becoming whatever this is, we were learning to make memes out of quantum entanglement. The entity's form destabilized further. Behind it, we could see similar disruptions occurring on other precursor ships. They can't handle illogical responses, Kira Nan whispered. Their evolution eliminated their ability to process anything that doesn't fit their perfect pattern. Then let's be really illogical, Thompson grinned. Lieutenant Ven, remember those knock-knock-knock jokes? What followed was perhaps the strangest battle in galactic history. As the precursor ships moved to surround us, our combined fleet responded with weapons of mass confusion. Humans transmitted their most abstract art directly into the quantum frequency. Lieutenant Ven told jokes that made no sense in any language. Kira Nan recited poetry that deliberately violated every rule of linguistic structure. The precursor ships began to shudder, their quantum-twisted forms unable to process the barrage of illogical, imperfect, gloriously chaotic information. Your resistance is the entity's voice wavered. Your resistance is not following expected patterns, does not compute, cannot optimize. Error. Error. Should we press our advantage? Kira Nan asked, her diplomatic training warring with the obvious opportunity. Summers shook her head. Not yet. Marcus, what do you think? Thompson was studying his readings intently. Their quantum structure is destabilizing, but look at these patterns. They're not just evolved precursors. They're trapped in some kind of temporal loop. They achieved their version of perfection and got stuck repeating it forever. Like a broken record, Summers mused, or a computer program caught in an infinite loop. Exactly. Thompson turned to me. Paxul, remember how you said we approached the original signal wrong? Maybe we need to approach this the same way. Not as advanced civilizations fighting a bigger threat, but as children with quantum computers and too much caffeine, I finished, beginning to understand. The next few hours tested every protocol, broke every rule, and probably violated several laws of physics. Our fleet moved in patterns based on human music. Thompson transmitted quantum equations in the form of limericks. Kira Nan improvised a diplomatic proposal that was deliberately riddled with logical paradoxes. And slowly, impossibly, it began to work. The precursor ship's perfect formations began to break down. Their quantum stability fluctuated wildly as they tried to process our deliberate imperfection. Your species are flawed, the entity declared, its voice now scattered across multiple frequencies. Imperfect. Unpredictable. Thank you, Lieutenant Ven replied cheerfully, making several humans snort with laughter. Looking around the bridge, I saw the impossible happening. Humans and aliens working together, throwing out rules and protocols, fighting perfection with glorious chaos. Kira Nan had abandoned all diplomatic pretense and was enthusiastically helping Thompson compose quantum physics shanties. The universe, it seemed, had a pretty good sense of timing too. But we weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. Sometimes the best ideas come from the most ridiculous places. In this case, it came from Thompson spilling his coffee on an ancient Earth entertainment device called a Game Boy. That's it, he shouted, jumping up so suddenly he knocked over 3 more beverages. We've been thinking about this all wrong. Admiral Summers, who had been in deep discussion with Kira Nan about fleet formations, turned to him. Care to share with the class, Marcus? The precursors evolved into a quantum state, right? They're basically living computer programs now. Super advanced, yes, but still programs. And what's the one thing every program fears? A virus, Lieutenant Venn suggested helpfully. Better, Thompson grinned. A badly written program running on obsolete hardware. I watched in bewilderment as he pulled up schematics for something that looked like it had been designed by a particularly unambitious rock. What exactly are we looking at? This, Thompson announced proudly, is the code from Pong. The most basic video game ever created, running on hardware so primitive it makes a quantum calculator look like overkill. Kira Nan blinked all 6 of her eyes. You want to fight transcended beings of pure quantum energy with a children's game. Not just any children's game, Summers interjected, catching on to Thompson's idea. The most imperfect, rudimentary attempt at digital entertainment ever created. And we're going to broadcast it through their quantum frequency using modified precursor tech. The assembled alien diplomats and officers stared in stunned silence. I was the first to recover my voice. That's completely insane. Exactly, Thompson beamed. They can handle complex attacks. They can process advanced quantum algorithms. But something this primitive, this imperfect, running through their own advanced systems? It'll be like trying to run modern software on a calculator. It'll create a cascading system failure, Summers continued. Their quantum consciousness will try to optimize it, but there's nothing to optimize. It's already as basic as it gets. Lieutenant Venn raised her hand. Question. What's Pong? What followed was perhaps the most surreal strategic planning session in galactic history. Humans explained the concept of bouncing a digital square back and forth while my species' top engineers figured out how to weaponize it. We'll need to modify every ship in the fleet, I pointed out. The power requirements alone. Already solved, Thompson interrupted, pulling up new schematics. We're not going to power it. We're going to let their own quantum field do the work. Like a virus hijacking a host's cellular machinery. Kira Nan, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. The High Council will never approve this. Using primitive technology as a weapon. It goes against every protocol we have. Good thing we're not asking them, Summers replied. By the time they finish debating the proper format for the denial request, we'll either have succeeded or been optimized out of existence. The next 12 hours were chaos. Humans and aliens worked side by side, retrofitting our ships with what amounted to quantum gaming consoles. Engineers who had spent their careers working with advanced technology now learned the basics of 1970s Earth programming. You realize, I said to Thompson as we worked, if this fails, we'll go down in history as the fleet that tried to fight quantum beings with a game of electronic table tennis. Better than going down as the fleet that did nothing but follow protocol, he replied, not looking up from his work. Besides, when's the last time you did something this fun? I had to admit, watching Lieutenant Venn attempt to play Pong while explaining quantum physics to a human engineer was pretty entertaining. The modified fleet assembled in formation, each ship now carrying what the humans called a tech downgrade payload. The precursor ships hung in space before us, their twisted forms a reminder of what happens when you pursue perfection too far. All ships reporting ready, Mira announced. Quantum field generators at maximum power. And the game code, Summers asked. Thompson gave a thumbs up. Loaded and ready. Most unoptimized, badly written version we could find. It's beautiful, in a horrible sort of way. Like your jokes, Lieutenant Venn added helpfully. Time to play, Summers declared, taking her command chair. All ships, prepare to broadcast on my mark. And someone record this. The High Council is never going to believe it otherwise. I looked around the bridge. Humans and aliens working together, about to launch the most ridiculous attack in military history, based on a game that was outdated before most of us were born. You know, Kira Nan said quietly beside me, when I trained as a diplomat, they never covered anything like this. When I trained as a communications specialist, they never mentioned humans, I replied. I think we're all learning as we go. Broadcasting in 3, Thompson announced, his fingers dancing across the console. 2, 1. The universe held its breath. And somewhere, I'm sure, the original precursors were either laughing or crying at what we were about to do to their quantum engineering. Possibly both. The moment we launched our attack, reality itself seemed to hiccup. The quantum field surrounding the precursor ships lit up like a supernova as the most primitive game code in human history collided with the most advanced consciousness in the galaxy. Status report, Summers barked. Thompson's fingers flew across his console. They're trying to process it. Their quantum consciousness is attempting to optimize the code, but oh, this is beautiful. They can't. It's too simple to improve, too basic to optimize, and too primitive to ignore. On our main screen, we watched as the twisted forms of the precursor ships began to twitch and distort. Their perfect patterns fractured as they encountered something they had never expected: deliberate imperfection. Your resistance is the entity's voice crackled across all frequencies. Loading, syntax error, does not compute. Lieutenant Venn bounced excitedly. Look, the square ball thing just scored a point. Sure enough, the simple digital square was bouncing through their quantum field, creating cascading disruptions wherever it went. The mighty evolved precursors, who had transcended physical form, were being undone by possibly the worst piece of entertainment software ever created. Their quantum field is destabilizing, Mira reported. They're trying to rewrite their own code to handle it, but they can't downgrade themselves enough without losing their transcended form, Thompson finished. They're caught in a paradox of their own making. Kira Nan stepped forward. Perhaps we should offer them terms? A diplomatic solution. Error. Cannot process. Perfection compromised. The entity's voice was breaking apart. What is purpose of moving square? Why does it not seek optimization? Because not everything needs to be perfect, Summers responded. Sometimes good enough is good enough. The precursor ships began to fold in on themselves, their quantum forms unable to maintain coherence in the face of pure, unadulterated simplicity. The entity made one last attempt to communicate. We were wrong. Evolution is not linear. Perfection is not advancement. How did you know? We didn't, I found myself saying. We just tried something so ridiculous it had to work. That's what happens when you let humans solve your problems. With a final burst of quantum energy, the precursor fleet collapsed in on itself, their transcended forms reverting to basic matter. Where mighty ships of impossible geometry had floated, now drifted simple crystalline structures. They're sleeping, Thompson announced, studying his readings. The code forced them to reboot, so to speak. They're back to their original form, before the twisted evolution. Well, Lieutenant Venn said into the stunned silence, I guess you could say they found their way back to square one. The entire bridge groaned at the pun, humans and aliens alike. Admiral Summers stood, straightening her uniform. Send word to Earth and the High Council. The threat is neutralized. Though I look forward to explaining how we did it. Oh, to be a fly on the wall for that council meeting, Kira Nan chuckled. Imagine telling them we saved the galaxy with a game that doesn't even have proper graphics. As our fleet regrouped and recovery operations began, I looked around the bridge. Humans and aliens working together, laughing, sharing stories. Lieutenant Venn was teaching a group of human engineers some game from her world, while Thompson discussed quantum physics with our science team using nothing but Earth entertainment references. You know, I said to Summers, when we first detected your species trying to decode that signal, I thought you were barely past rubbing sticks together. She smiled. And now? Now I think the sticks were probably cleverly disguised quantum computers all along. The universe, it turns out, doesn't care about perfection. It doesn't care about protocols or proper procedures or even advanced technology. Sometimes all it takes is the right kind of wrong solution, applied with just enough caffeine and determination. And maybe, just maybe, a really bad video game.